Welcome to episode 158 of Nobody Special.
In this episode, we talk about Mark Driscoll and Mars Hill.
The Gospel Outpost presents Nobody Special. Hey everyone, welcome to Nobody Special, two Nobodies talking about the somebody who matters. I'm Danny, the host and church growth specialist of Nobody Special.
And I'm Caleb, you're the host of Nobody Special. This is the podcast where two generations of people talk about God, pop culture, politics, and everything in between, all while not taking any of it too seriously.
Come on and slam.
We're going to have a jam.
Welcome back to the jam. Caleb, the long-awaited cinematic masterpiece, if I could be so bold to say.
Okay.
Comes out today, the day this podcast comes out.
Oh, wow.
Finally, I think.
I will not be watching it. But...
this is a gem, divinely inspired movie.
Yeah.
Space Jam 2.
Is it?
Yeah. No. So I'm just going to read the synopsis of this movie. Superstar LeBron James and his young son Dom get trapped in a digital space by a rogue AI. To get home safely, LeBron teams up with Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and the rest of the Looney Tunes gang for a high-stakes basketball game against the AI's digitalized champions of the court, a powered-up roster called the Goon Squad.
Yeah. So isn't that just like the first Space Jam? Which I've actually never seen. Oh, you're still going.
LeBron James and his son get caught on the internet, and the only way they can get out is by basketball.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get
seems realistic,
real deep into this thing in order to understand that it's a movie about basketball.
Yeah. Oh, Michael B. Jordan's in it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which feels appropriate.
Yeah.
Given
I love that guy.
That Michael Jordan... Can I ask a dumb question?
Yes.
Are they related? That's his son, right? Is that his son? I'm...
Michael Jordan's son? No, that's not his son.
His son is not Michael B. Jordan?
No. Maybe. I mean, at least I've never heard that. And
listen, that's not a race thing.
They don't really look alike, if I'm being honest.
I always thought it was weird. Like that is that.
That's not a race
to Donna
thing,
and Michael A. Jordan.
Michael A. Jordan.
Is that? I honestly, like, in my head, it's always been, this is Michael Jordan's son, because they have the same name, as if it's an Evander Holyfield thing, because he's the guy who names all of his kids Evander Holyfield, right? Evander Holyfield names all, like, dude has like 8 kids, and he's like, you're Evander Holyfield the 7th, or something. I honestly, this is not what we're talking about today, because I just wanted to... His father's is Michael A. Jordan, and he's Michael B. Jordan. And if he has a son, we know what the name's going to be.
Michael C. Jordan.
This is not... Who is Michael B. Jordan's father? Oh, sorry, Michael A. Jordan. But who is that?
Yeah, it's not Michael Jordan.
People also searched for Michael Jordan, just kind of going like, do you mean this one?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not.
I don't know why. I mean,
see why you'd think that.
Technically, his father is Michael Jordan.
Well, yes, you're right, but it's not the
not
famed
the one I was
basketball player,
yes,
Michael Jordan.
Absolutely.
Who is in the first Space Jam? Is that Michael Jordan?
Michael Jordan.
Oh, I've never actually watched that.
Oh, it's pretty good. That movie's good. This movie...
I've seen like 15 minutes.
This movie, I am fully expecting LeBron James to walk out 5 minutes early off the field when he realizes they're not doing well. Because that man he's like, it's not about me. I'm a cartoon anyway. And they cartoonize him a bit, which they didn't do for Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
It was just him and a bunch of people in green bodysuits pretending to play basketball.
Could you imagine? Not only are they taking like this person who is not a professional actor, but then they place him in this completely virtual world where he can't even like see the people he's acting with.
Yeah.
Is he a good actor? Not LeBron, but Michael Jordan.
Yeah, LeBron, no, there's not a chance. So in the 90s, here, I'm going to explain something about the 90s to you. Okay. We decided around like 92 to like just throw athletes in things. They were hosting Saturday Night Live. They were making movies.
Right.
It gave us Kazam starring Shaquille O'Neal, which is abject garbage of a movie.
Nice.
Because Shaquille O'Neal is as good of an actor as you think he is.
I don't know. I've seen him in a lot of commercials, and I gotta say, he's blowing.
He only had to be good for 5 seconds and was unable to do so.
He's good if he's not talking.
Right.
It's a reality.
But yeah, that's yeah. Anyway, this is not what I meant to look up. What's Rotten Tomatoes?
Because why are you looking?
I don't
Fandango?
know. So I'm buying movie tickets instead of paying attention. Kazam, I believe, is like, all right. Guess the Rotten Tomatoes score of Kazam.
I'm gonna say 33%.
I already know you're wrong. There's no way it's that high. 5%. Wow. This movie is terrible. It's Shaquille O'Neal trying to be a genie and make rhymes the whole time, but
what?
Yeah, he rhymes the whole time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so 5% on Rotten Tomatoes, 30. That is generous, sir. For
this
what
new
this thing is.
Space Jam movie, I watched the trailer and it already, just doesn't look like a movie I'm gonna watch.
No,
and
it's
then
not.
It's also like I wasn't, to be honest, I'm not I'm not thrilled by the idea of the plot of the first Space Jam anyways, and this is copying it exactly. So it's really, I just don't like supporting movies that are just money grabs, to be honest. The first,
it was actually good, a movie and a fun plot. Mm-hmm. This, though, they took all the things that made
39%. Wow.
For Space Jam 2, they took all the things that made the first Space Jam good, and they took those out because the basketball is an afterthought here, because they're trying to fight an internet kind of a virus played by Don Cheadle, who's stealing personal information, and then basketball, and that's about what is happening now. It was actually a fun plot in the first. It was a good movie. The first Space Jam, 44. But
the thing that happened is I missed it as a kid. Mm-hmm. So like I can't go back and watch it now and like think that it's
not
movie.
Bad. Now I will say, and I had no intention of talking about this today, but I saw something and it brought it up. They intentionally, the female bunny character, they intentionally made her less hot and told people that they were unsexualizing Lola Bunny.
Mm-hmm. I've heard about that. That's a thing.
Yeah. And people said disturbing. Like, as they announced that, a lot of people, they stated, I wasn't into Lola Bunny.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was, even as a kid, I was watching the first Space Jam like, yeah, that's weird. Like you crop top and made this bunny appear very sexual. Just like, hey Bugs, do you want to come out on the court with me?
Oh gosh, I'm done with this.
Just like,
I don't want to listen to your bunny impression.
Even as a kid, I was just like, that's weird. We've kind of, it's possible we've gone too far here and might need to roll it on back a little bit. But so
are they claiming that LeBron James is the next Michael Jordan by putting him in this movie? I've heard a lot of debate around it should be Steph Curry.
Yeah.
Steph Curry.
Uh-huh.
Whoops.
I said that very confidently, and then
No, Steph Curry is what people...
Stephen Curry, yes.
So it's both.
Both are right. Correct.
Hey, good job. Look at us.
I said that so confidently, and then thought, you don't know anything about sports. Why'd you come out swinging so hard?
I don't know anything about sports. To be honest with you, I just played basketball for the first time the other night.
First time,
at students.
First time since or ever? Could you just said I just played basketball for the first time?
I want to say ever, but I played it like a little bit before, like as a kid.
You've never
I played an actual match.
Played basketball.
I played an actual match
I
with.
have to delete all of our notes for what we're talking about because we're talking about this now
with my with my middle school boys on Wednesday nights.
Wait.
Who I'm the leader of.
Wait.
And they're fast.
Yes, absolutely. Honorable. You totally do it. A man of God, sure. You've never... Can you think of a time where you've played
I've
basketball?
played basketball. But like...
Can you think of... I need a memory of a time...
I have a memory.
You're 20!
I have a memory. When I was like 16, I attempted to play.
Oh my gosh. That's not better.
I was playing other sports.
Was 4 years ago.
Like... Okay, like an actual basketball match. Like, everyone shoots the ball around as a kid. Everyone plays horse or pig. All that stuff. But, like, you know. You know what I mean?
You've never played a game of basketball.
I'm just really showing off my whiteness right here.
Listen, your first game of basketball was at 16.
That's not my first game. I think.
Name a memory. You're like,
I don't have a lot of memories,
16.
all right? Jeez.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't ready for that.
But after I played basketball the other night, my leg muscles gave out. I'm not joking. I tried to like walk after, and apparently I'm old now.
Well, yes, because it's unused muscles that you've never used before.
It is different muscles. I'll give you that. Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry. Can we we need a new podcast where it's just Caleb tries stuff he's never done and stuff like swimming, or something, driven a car, tied shoes.
Okay.
I'm not good at basketball, but I mean, I've definitely played basketball games.
It's fun.
Yeah, but you're talking about it as if someone who's discovered fruit. Have y'all seen this? I believe they're called apples.
Apples. Okay, wait. I kid you not.
Oh,
There's
my gosh.
someone that I know that
I'm already crying. You can't do this to me.
That we were at a party for a discipleship group,
mm-hmm.
and they went to someone made guacamole. I kid you not. Mm-hmm. They were like, "Oh, this is interesting. I've never actually tried avocado dip." Avocado.
Anyway, he's no longer in the church.
Yeah, we kicked him out.
We've excommunicated him.
But he'd never had guacamole, ever, and he'd never really eaten avocados either.
I will say there are still foods I haven't had. I've had some exotic foods, but not a ton.
Name one.
I've had eel.
Name one you haven't had.
Oh,
We're really off topic.
Most things that are purple.
Purple.
Yes, purple foods.
A lot of dragon fruit.
A lot of things in seafood. I just hard no on that one. A lot of seafoody things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've had. Well, I've tasted scallops, but I've never had scallops.
I love seafood. You either love it or hate it, typically. All right, should we talk about our actual topic?
LeBron James, though, Space Jam's coming out, and I am so looking forward to skipping every minute of this movie.
Yeah. I'm just not that interested in it.
Yeah.
I'm fine if other people want to go see it. I'm not.
I think the thing that has turned me off the most to it is that LeBron James tends to be a pretty ego-based individual.
Right.
And very arrogant, and I think those kinds of qualities can be difficult qualities to maintain, and not just in sports, but in the church as well. Which brings us to our topic for the day. There was a podcast that's come out.
Yes.
Mike Cosper from Christianity Today has put out a podcast in the same kind of a vein of serial of investigating into a topic, talking about it, and putting out all the info for stories people are interested in going through. And it's all about the rise and fall of Mars Hill Church. This church, I believe it was planted in, I want to say 2007, is that right? Or 2004?
2000, something like that.
So somewhere close to that.
Yes.
It grew quick overnight. It exploded in growth. And then about a decade and a half after, it just closed its doors. And people, at the end of that, they were spiritually and emotionally abused and hurt. And just many people started asking, what happened to Mars Hill?
Right.
And so this podcast It digs into those stories, digs into the cause, really gets into the details of it pretty deep.
Yeah.
They just put out episode number 4 as of the day of taping, and it's been an interesting kind of a case study of what happened to this church and
Right.
Why did it do the things it did.
Yeah. It is super interesting. I'd never really heard of it, but I've heard of Mark Driscoll. I'd never really heard of the church, but
yeah,
it is. I've listened. I haven't listened to all of them, but I've listened to 2.5 episodes, and they're still coming out. And I would encourage you to go watch them. Obviously, we don't want to just talk about it and not encourage you to go support them as well.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Cosper, he's doing a fantastic job. Actually, he brought up a thing in his current episode that all the episodes are like pre-taped, pre-scripted because they're audio-based episodes. Right. And it's on a thing that occurred in the past, but they're still digging into the info, so they're trying to update the content as it becomes available to them, and it's just taking longer than they thought because of the things they're unpacking and undoing in the process. So It's been pretty interesting as far as that goes, but it's unpacking this massive story that blew up just over the span of about a decade and a half.
Yeah, and I think one thing that, because I feel like a lot of people, you've probably heard of this podcast already, but one thing I would encourage you to do, and definitely the purpose of this podcast from Mike Cosper, is that you wouldn't just like consume this as content, but you would genuinely
as like spicy
take this,
content.
Yeah, but you take it and you'd learn from what you're hearing and what they're unpacking to be able to avoid that at all costs. And so like it can be very tempting, especially like I feel this while listening to this as well, just to listen and like enjoy it almost like it's a crime podcast, you know?
Right.
And like,
yeah, it's kind of weird to view it like that, but you know.
And it's kind of like just very interesting and I just want to consume it and it's enjoyable, but like I'm trying to not view it as that and view this as it is very serious and that we should try and learn as best we can from it.
One of the things they brought up in the first episode that I thought made a fantastic point is, okay, why did this thing fail? And they brought up that part of it is the culture of the internet bled into the ego of Mark Driscoll because articles are coming out because Mark created this kind of shtick of that's maybe too mean of a term. The branding of Mark Driscoll, I guess, if that's a phrase. Sure. It was all about trying to claim difficult things, to say very hard things, to punch people, to be aggressive, and all the stuff. And so that is very polarizing in its presentation. And out of this, people wanted to watch the spectacle. Yeah. They brought up a few bloggers that every time they did an article on this church, they noticed an increase in their stats. And I mean, that's part of the blogging game. That's part of that is you have to drive traffic, and sometimes you have to pull traffic. And they noticed that if they talked about this church, they got more traffic, so they talked about the church. Right. I think to kind of a certain extent, that's good, and a certain extent that can be manipulative. Yeah. But at the same time, in asking why did this church elevate to the point that it did so quick and then blow up as fast as it did, Cosper makes a fair point to say that's kind of on us too. That instead of trying to pursue God, we were drawn into the spicy type of a nature of church drama. I mean, our culture is a culture that revolves around drama. Yeah. That it craves drama, it craves conflict, it craves that kind of attention that it's a type of, we enjoy watching people crumble. Yeah.
I think it's just, it's a part of our flesh. I mean, and it, that we enjoy to see other people undone and to see us prevail. And that goes for churches too. I would love to see, like, deep down at the core, but I hate to say it, but like part of me enjoys to see my church do really well and another church start to suffer because of something. And it's really messed up, but you have to be honest with everyone has that part of themselves, and in that, like, we can't feed that, and that is a lot of what this talks about,
right?
And it's a lot of what happens in this church is because these things, what happens with Mark Driscoll, that he may be the core of it all, but really the things that allowed it to happen is everyone is just watching and not really doing anything. They're just, whether that's people at his church, whether that's people blogging about him, whether that's, like Mike Cosper said, Christianity Today, just also writing blogs about this, that everyone is feeding into him and not actually stopping him and be like,
right,
hey, are you okay? Like,
and that's part of the thing about ego, is that it likes to be fed. I mean,
right.
it's a glutton. Ego is a glutton. Pride is a glutton, in that it'll consume. But to me, the caution I keep on these kinds of podcasts are I don't think it's good to just air the church's dirty laundry so hard.
Right.
So I do caution against, if a person's in a place of being just critical of the church or angry at the church, to maybe skip this podcast. And I mean our podcast, and also Christianity Today's podcast on
right.
what happened to Mars Hill, just because it's important to be in a better spiritual place, that the goal of this isn't to just go like, well, this is why churches are stupid, but to go, okay, what happened and how do we not do this again? And I do think the other part is it is a bit unfair to Mark Driscoll, not because anything they're claiming is inaccurate, but because Mark Driscoll isn't the only person, especially over the past decade. This has been a thing of these high-profile pastors. You know, you got Mark Driscoll, Perry Noble, Joshua Harris, James McDonald. That Ravi Zacharias, all these big name people that have been thrust into this type of professional Christian, professional Christian, that their name and branding are important, that have had huge moral failures in the process, and have taken down a lot of people also, and to that, I don't think Driscoll is in a category all of his own. Driscoll's just the biggest that people know because of his draw and charisma.
Right. Yeah. It is, and I think it's a unique perspective that we get to learn from this, because this church doesn't exist anymore.
Does this church exist anymore? This is a fun question.
It is a fun question. I mean, but like, as far as the actual buildings, the structure, the staff,
right?
Like, that's not there anymore. So I feel like you're able to learn from it almost as like history. Although, like you said, we still need to be sensitive to how we feel about it.
Right.
Your perspective on this church, well, it may be a former church, but still, just like you would study history and have to be sensitive about things that are recent history as well.
Right. So my issue, even in the pastors I brought up, Mark Driscoll, Perry Noble, Joshua Harris deconstructed his faith. I think he only marginally considers himself a Christian anyway, and his Instagram has gotten remarkably smug in the process of just, I'm going to ask questions. Okay, all right, Josh. And James McDonald, they've all been removed out of their church to the intent of there is a growth process they have to go through, and all three of these people, Mark, Perry, and James, did not do it. And Mark planted a church. Perry stopped his process ahead of time to plant a church called Redemption Church or something like that, or Second Chance Church, or I don't know, some kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of
Second
a name
Chance
of
Church.
No, I mean that's absolutely it. And I just think there was an inability or an unwillingness to work through the process of restoration.
Right. Because Mark technically...
Second Chance Church. That's
Second
the
Chance
actual name of this church.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard of Perry Noble.
Perry Noble's a good guy. Or he was.
But Mark Driscoll is interesting too, because from listening to this, it doesn't sound like he actually came to grips with like the things that had gone on, because they weren't really fleshed out yet. He resigned before all of that. And did he plant this church immediately after? Is that like what he went on to do?
Pretty soon after, yeah.
Yeah. So like it's an interesting perspective for him, because he didn't really have a huge... Obviously, the church died, which is huge. But for him, at least, his perspective, he resigned and started another church.
Right.
And it just seems like business is business, and he's just moving on, from job to job.
Right. I mean,
so
there
like,
was a bit of time in between there, but I would almost... And I don't know. This is pure conjecture on my part. I'm more willing to claim that there was a non-compete in his contract, probably, that stopped him from doing it, because the way that he stopped it was to say that, no, I'm not going to go through this growth process. I'm not going to go through this. Instead, anybody that speaks out against me is just a devil trying to stop a work of God. This is kind of the sentiment of Driscoll throughout this, is that anybody that stood in his path was in rebellion against God himself.
Right.
And even in Driscoll's teaching, the thing that he started doing is conflating the commandments of God and the authority of the pastor as interchangeable. That if the pastor speaks this, then if they are God-fearing Christians, then they will do the thing the pastor actually tells them. Right. Now, there is... He's half right. Right. I mean, I think the temptation of a lot of people is just anti-clericism, especially if they go through these things and say, well, then I'm just not going to ever pay attention to my spiritual authority. And they don't ever say it in that way, because that's insane, and the answer is right there. But they say, like, well, I don't have to listen to the pastor. He doesn't have any authority over me. That's actually biblically not true either. Right. But the authority of the pastor flows out from God the Father through Jesus Christ, through the Spirit in him, and that when the two conflict, you default to following Christ. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it is a weird blend, right? Because in one hand, like you said, he is right, and we should put authority towards our pastor. Right. Yeah. Half right.
Half right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And like, we should have have authority for our pastor and operate in that. But like, it does so easily switch, because pastors are human. They're inevitably going to have faults, and that means that if we as congregants view that wrong, then like, we can view the pastor as God, right? And any time he has a misstep, then we, whether we realize it or not, are kind of wounded by that a bit. And that's where a lot of like the faults of this church go to, because he didn't, I'd say it is like, listening to all these clips they have, like, it is a very subtle, it's not like he's like outright saying, all the time, I guess sometimes he does outright say, but a lot of them are very subtly switching these people's mindsets to almost go underneath like a spell, where he has control over them. And when you do that, they interviewed a psychologist person, and she talks a lot about like spiritual trauma. And when you do that, and you start to view everything as the pastor says is what God says, then when they say something that is not in line with truth or the scripture, then you are just going to cause wounds. And it is like, I couldn't imagine, like, there's Whether
So-
it's like very light trauma or
Mhm.
full on, like some pastors like Ravi Zacharias, full on sexual trauma,
Mm-hmm.
like that's a very painful
Sure.
thing to go through.
Sure. And this is kind of the point that you and I are going to come at this from two different perspectives. You know, me as ordained clergy, and I'm not claiming that to drop title or anything.
Right.
But as ordained clergy, I come at it from a much different perspective of from the things that this man stated in the pulpit. He was absolutely 100% out of line. Now, there's a difference between preaching truth and they needed to hear that and all that, and that's a big part of the defense against Driscoll is people claimed, well, he's just saying things they need to hear and he's a bit edgy, and I'm like, he was edgy to the point of being edgy.
Yeah.
There are times, and I think offense is a tool.
Right.
I don't think there is never a time to be offensive. There are absolutely times to be offensive, but the purpose, especially in Driscoll's offense, it was to be offensive.
Yeah.
To draw people in by being edgy, to be this kind of mid-20s. I don't want to say edgelord pastor, but I don't really have another phrase for it. Yeah.
Never heard that, but I like it.
Yeah, edgelord. Actual, maybe. Let me look that up real quick. Edgelord, who expresses opinions which are either strongly nihilistic. Yeah, actually, yes.
Yeah.
They were, yeah. Essentially, Tyler Durden out of Fight Club is a big thing to understand it, and that was actually a movie in that church. But to be offensive to the point of being offensive, instead of to be offensive in order to offend the person with the gospel,
Right.
And he overstepped on a fair amount of things. Especially this idea of biblical manhood. He proposed a manhood that went above and beyond anything Scripture actually claimed, and then berated people when they didn't meet up to those standards.
Right. I think it is interesting. Like this edginess is, you're right in the sense that things do need to be edgy sometimes because the gospel is edgy in a lot of ways, but where he just overdoes it. I think the presentation of the gospel is hugely important, and that's what he got wrong. His tone, his what he's saying is ultimately wrong. And I think I don't remember his name, but that I admire, and I know you admire too, who what is his name? He's in American Gospel. He has more of a soft. You say a lot that he never smiles.
Oh yeah. No, I saw a picture of him smiling. I'm like, don't do that.
You know his name?
Yeah, sure do.
Oh gosh.
Paul Washer.
Yeah, Paul Washer. Because
I
listening
literally had to think dirty clothes first, and then I would get there.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Listening to his sermons where he lets the gospel be offensive. Not him, not the way he's presenting it, but the things he says, he just straight up says the gospel, and it is naturally going to offend our flesh. And I think that I admire that opposed to this, where you're taking it a next step where not only is the gospel already offensive to the flesh, but then you're adding this edgy take on it. And being harsh and full of anger, honestly. Yeah. And I always come back and think to the verse that Paul talks about, and I never know the actual. I should look at the citing of this verse, but where he talks about lofty speech, and that, like it's an offense to God to think that you can sway people with your speech more than the gospel does. And I think of that when I hear Mark Driscoll talk and all of these clips. I think that he's trying to overtake the gospel, put himself at the forefront, instead of letting the gospel and the Holy Spirit speak for itself.
That's 1 Corinthians 2, 1-5, somewhere around about in there. Nice. That Paul talks about that he didn't come in doing all these things. I don't even think the speech is bad. I don't think that's the point of the thing Paul's claiming. He's claiming that the only thing that's needed is the gospel. Right. Everything beyond that is just ancillary. It's extra.
Yeah.
And the point isn't to dazzle people by our ability to be witty or any of that. It's instead to proclaim the gospel. And I think for Driscoll, it was a main. I personally found two big issues just digging into this. The first is the issue of pride. Mm-hmm. It's pride, ego, arrogance that fueled and drove this man to do the things that he did. And it didn't matter the people that got injured in the process.
Right.
But the other end is there was a stage of spiritual formation and a maturity that got skipped. I mean, Driscoll, Joshua Harris, Perry Noble, James McDonald. James McDonald's different. I honestly don't know how he made it this far. And had none kind of scandal until 2-3 years ago. Yeah. But there was this kind of an immaturity to them that they never grew out of because it got them to the place that they're at.
Yeah.
And they never needed to grow out of that because it was working. They never had to grow to be able to come under people, to mentor them, to tell them the things that they need to grow in. I mean, kind of the pastoral, the formative process is very important.
Yeah.
Because you don't. A church, if I've never been employed at a church, if I've never preached, if I've never done any of these things, probably just coming out of seminary to be a lead pastor. I know it can be done. I would caution against it, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Even though they have the masters, they have all the things, I would still caution against it just because there's more to it than just the academic training that a Bible degree, and I mean a master's degree, gives.
Yeah.
I think there's more to it than just I have the knowledge and now I'm just going to impart that. There's other aspects that you're just not prepared for even getting into a church.
I think I've never been a pastor, but I would imagine that you have to learn how to ultimately just rely on God to take care of all those things. And that's not something that you'd learn overnight. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that you can attest to that. You're a lot older than I am. And that's just that's not just a pastor.
I'm a little older than you.
That's not just a pastor thing. That's every Christian has to wrestle with that. But I think especially pastors to a different degree have to wrestle with. I don't have the qualifications. It doesn't matter. The ordination, the seminary, any of that. The thing that makes me and gives me authority is God, and having to ultimately, I'm sure, wrestle with the pride of that. And I think that's what you're saying is with all of these young people who haven't really learned that, yet let their charisma just take hold,
right?
Instead of
and charisma can get you a lot.
Yeah,
I mean,
oh for sure.
Driscoll got by on charisma.
Yeah,
there was something about this man that told them difficult, mean things that you wanted to follow. Charisma can get you a very good amount of time until the floor drops out, and I think for candid, this is going to be the part where the two generations of people talk about God, pop culture, two generations part. Early mid-20s, I thought I was so prepared to plant a church, and that I could absolutely do it. And to be fair, I probably could have. Do you know what I mean? Right. I probably could have made it happen, done it, all that. I am so thankful nobody told me in my 20s, even 28, 29, that we feel you're prepared to go plant a church. There's something that occurs just over time of needing to understand you don't know anything.
Right.
And to be honest, that isn't a thing people in their 20s tend to be really good at understanding, the depth that they don't know.
I'm just going to say no comment on that one.
I mean, I've had many conversations, especially over the past few weeks, that have just been essentially platitude-based conclusions of just, well, but this, and I'm like,
platitude.
Yeah, as in just a kind of a quippy statement of just, I'm trying not to say the specific things they said because then you'll know I'm talking about you, and what I feel about our conversations. No, I'm kidding. I love this person dearly, but it's this idea of, I have found, especially those in college, tend to feel as if they are at the height of their intellectual game,
right?
And they know more than other people, and if you're in your 20s, the best thing I can encourage is to just take that part of you and to crucify it to death, because you don't know anything. And I was also there. There was a time, now here, I'll tell an embarrassing story about myself, that I was an education minor. Minor. I took 5 courses in education, maybe a little more than that. And I came back home after graduating, and my mother, who could have retired as a teacher, and has a degree in a master's in education or something like that, I then began to tell her how it really is. And she indulged me for a bit. Yeah. And then it just like, it turned into, how dare you? And it wasn't until I heard that I thought, like, no, she's right. How dare me? Yeah. Like, this person who's been doing this for 30 years, and I took 4 classes in it, and like, well, no, things are actually this. And then that kind of error of pride coming out of that, you have to be able to put that to death, or end up or end up in the same boat as Driscoll, a Noble, and James, a McDonald. Yeah.
I mean, I think ultimately, for some reason, that's how we respond as humans, is coming into a situation with another person and feeling like you have to prove yourself, like you know more than them, when ultimately it's true both ways. Like, the young person can have some new ideas, and that can be totally true. Sure. And so, like, both sides need to give a little bit of wiggle room on that. But ultimately, I think that, for sure, like, so I find that to be true myself too.
There's a point, though, and this is kind of the point I'm getting at. There's a point where you essentially stop trying to prove yourself. Of just like, nah, it's where I'm at. Yeah. And I'm not claiming that you stop growing, but especially early 20s is about trying to, like, I have to prove myself. And I'm mid 30s. I don't really care. Like, I don't have to prove myself. I don't have to prove anything. Yeah. You know, like, and I'm not even done growing. I'm thinking about going back to school, but it isn't to, like, prove myself or this. It's just because, like, I miss it, and I'm a huge nerd. Like, that's really the reason, by the way.
Which I think is something that's a great point, because a lot of people, myself included, I see this in myself a lot, is I feel like I have to attain this goal, like this dream job or something like that immediately. Right. When the reality is, I have years to do that. Right. Like, in my mind, I want to set the goal by the time I'm 50. That's like, I would like to be somewhere in that range. And we just have this hurried presence when it comes to everything. And it's very true. And I think a lot of that does come from feeling like we need to prove ourselves. Right. Which is a lot of what the culture around us says, and I think it does bleed in the Christian culture a lot, which is very unfortunate.
Absolutely, but I found a good amount of it's projected onto other people. That this pressure, if I'm feeling there's this pressure, I'm not going to put it on me. Well, I am going to put it on me, but I'm also going to project it out to others. I mean, these are the people who are 22 and telling me all the things I just got to do to be married. I'm like, hey, I'm 36, kiss my butt. I mean, like I'm, it's not that I don't know. I just don't care. Like that, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And they'll sit me down and be like, Danny, I've been thinking about your situation. I'm like, I'm gonna stop you right there.
That's another podcast.
Why don't you think about your situation, or I'm gonna mess up your situation? Like I'm gonna stop you because you're about to say something dumb that you don't know about, and I'm gonna point it out to you. You know, so or these, and it's even come out in different places of I'm okay talking about theology and that kind of stuff, and even being challenged on it, but to just tell me how it is because a person has had one class in theology, in undergrad Bible college theology.
Right.
There has to be a humbling that occurs. And I think, especially for Driscoll, for Noble, and McDonald, there is a case that they're being humbled or they're being destroyed. Yeah. In Romans 9, it talks about that, or tells us that, what if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction. That there is even a case that even if these guys in their colossal flame out will glorify God in the flame out. That God will still be able to be on a display in this. Yeah. But from my perspective, I'd rather not be that person. Yeah. There are people that I think God is going to demonstrate God's ability to be God through their destruction. Right. But I am trying to be humble enough that not be me. Yeah,
for sure. I think it's super... This whole thing is super interesting, and I mean, obviously, we're going to talk more about getting into be a pastor and qualifications, and which is definitely more your forte. But I think the thing that I see to prevent this from happening is to not let anything be an idol, and that includes your pastor. This church, Mars Hill, was full of people under this guy's spell, and I don't even know if a lot of them thought that
under spell sounds so dramatic. Sorry.
It does. Yeah, it is dramatic, but you know what I mean. So they think that they're not, and that it's this gospel driven thing, which I think for sure that's true. It's part of it is driven by the gospel. But everyone was just following along, and it's become so normal. But really, the thing that we have to do as Christians is to not let anything become this big authority in our life besides Jesus. Like we said, we need to balance that authority with the pastor. But that doesn't mean you can't question him. That doesn't mean that you can't ask questions like think about his character. Like, you should do those things. And you should have thoughts about your pastor, and it would be kind to actually step out and share those things. Be gentle, be kind, of course, and loving. But if you think that there's something that he needs to work on, something this serious, right, then step in and say that. And obviously there's a bunch of people that probably talked to Mark Driscoll. Like you said, Paul David Tripp. Early on.
They brought in PDT, which, by the way, if we're not calling him PDT yet, we're calling him PDT now. Starts here. Nobody special started. PDT, they brought him in on a consult. PDT, he asks a lot of questions, says like, yeah, this place is over. It's just a matter of time. It's a horrible situation that you have going on, and it's not going to ever fix. So I'd go ahead and polish your resume. Deuces, we out. He said it differently because he's much nicer than I am. Yeah. But no, he definitely.
But I mean, it's something
that's toxic, and it will only implode.
that you have to do. Like, you have to be wary of who you are giving your authority, not
Right.
authority to. I'm trying to, what is the right way to say it? Whose authority you are under, I guess. And be respectful, but that doesn't mean that you can't really dig into what they're saying. Like, so my church, to be honest, is very similar to this church, and me and Danny have talked a lot about this. Very similar.
They came into Acts 29 when Driscoll was still a part of it.
Yeah. My church is part of Acts 29, and I think that I see a lot of what is happening here in my church, and like not super negative things. I'm not saying that, but in the sense that I could see the potential for it becoming that. And there's nothing wrong with me keeping an eye on my pastor, because ultimately that's the loving thing to do.
Well, I think the takeaway from this, because I know basically no one who listens to this podcast is pastoral in nature, or there's not a lot of pastors that pay attention to this podcast, but the things we cheer on in our pastor need to be congruent to the things that Paul puts down in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through number 7.
I just read through that verse.
You want to give it a read for us?
Yes, I do. The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil.
So one of the things in this is that, personally, just thinking through it, I know I can put a name by all of those, of just in, and I'm not talking about that. Well, everyone struggles with self-control. They had 2 cookies at dinner instead of 1, or I don't think that's kind of the thing it's talking about. I think they're talking about they have no self-control.
Right.
And there are pastors that I can put by all of those things that should have never been put in the place to do that, but a few of them were put in that place because their congregation cheered them on in the process. I mean, I'm thinking of pastors that are essentially drunkards that were permitted to be that and still be their pastor because, well, no, pastor's just one of us, and it makes them more relatable. And now you're that. To whom is my big question there? Because if I'm trapped in my flesh, I actually don't want my pastor to be relatable. I don't want the shepherd to be as useless as the sheep. Or a quarrelsome, if they're just prepared to get in a fight. That's actually a bad display of the gospel. Right. That the gospel doesn't go and pick all the fights and get into quarrels, but instead brings peace. Now, granted, it brings peace through the defeat of death and darkness and sin, but it's not quarrelsome. It doesn't just go like, "What'd you say?" and start swinging. That's still drunkard anyway. But all these things in us, we need to be cautious to not cheer these things on, even in our pastor. I mean, there are plenty of cases of people going, I enjoy that our pastor just tells it how it is. Point in there to where the pastor needs to just tell it how it is, because oftentimes that's just an excuse to be a brash jerk and a mouth off, instead of giving any kind of grace or love to the thing that they're actually trying to say. Yeah.
I think one of the best things we can do is to read the word, obviously for ourselves, but where we read it and we become so saturated with it that we know it, and we know God better through that. So that when things like a pastor, like Mark Driscoll, when things like this happen, that we can sniff it out, and tell that like that's not parallel with what the Bible's saying.
Right.
And it makes it a lot easier to not become just this zombie, like feeding off of what the pastor's saying and not doing anything else throughout our week to study the Word or to know God more. That you'll be able to love others around. Like, not just, this doesn't just apply to the pastor. Like, we could get into the benefits of reading God's Word, but that is one of them. Is
read God's Word.
Yeah, just read it.
We're not getting into this today.
But
do it.
When you know God's Word, you know when something is not in God's Word.
Right.
Is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And that makes things a lot easier, black and white, when it comes to pointing sin out in your life and other people's lives. And like I said before, that doesn't mean that you're harsh about that, but you need to be kind and loving. But it is the loving thing to do, to point this out in your pastor, because we're learning now that a lot of the things that are making pastors fall don't start with some sexual fantasy or some thing like that, but it starts with their character. So the earlier we can point these things out, then you're going to gain a brother, like the Bible says. You're going to gain your church back. That this is not a future that we want to see just for some church drama to be able to listen to podcasts.
Right.
The goal is that this would never happen again.
There's a balance. I'm not saying anything you're saying is incorrect. It just, this is again the other perspective of, like,
for sure,
the amount of conversations I've had of, well, Danny, all that you just need to do, and I'm like, the conversation guy, he wanted to tell me about a thing. I needed to be careful. The thing is, I spoke to the teens. I was a youth pastor this time, and that I need to be careful about the things I told the teens, because they internalize them. And I'm like, is there a specific thing that you're actually asking? Like, what? Why are we having this conversation? And there was a bigger problem on this conversation, but he wasn't actually thinking of anything. But it was just all that you need to do. This isn't an open.
Exactly.
Invite to just criticize the pastor and think,
for sure, well,
I know better than he does. He's still a spiritual authority. But for this specific conversation, I was at a urinal peeing. Like, well, I stopped peeing at that point, and I had to tell this person, can we have this conversation another time when my genitalia aren't out of my pants? Like, what are you doing? This is not a
I'm
meeting.
Confused. How big of a... Oh, wait. You said a urinal?
I was a urinal.
Oh, I thought you... In my mind, I thought you were talking about a porta potty. I was like, why are you in a porta potty with someone else? Anyways, sorry. That's just where my brain went.
No, it was at... Like, there wasn't anything specific that I had done or stated or anything. This guy had nothing. He's just like, his genitalia's out. Now's the time to make it personal. Like, it's super not. This isn't a call to just pick on the pastor, because especially, I gotta tell you, man, as I got emails. Maybe I shouldn't even say this one, but we're already here, so why not?
Yeah.
I've gotten emails during COVID. One day for canceling a thing, and then the next day for not doing enough things. And I'm just like, y'all, my soul hurts, and we're dropping out professionally because of the criticism. So the goal is build up.
Yes.
It isn't to just tear down.
For sure.
And especially if I'm not doing any of the things in here, if I'm not being quarrelsome, if I'm not puffed up, if I'm not a new convert, all these things, then you have to determine, is this just style preference? And if it's like, well, all that you got to do is play more hymns, cool. You can just
find a new church.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That was a really bad example. I don't know why I went there, but there are, there are things. we all need to be okay to say, this is a preference I have, and I don't understand the place I'm at, but I know God has me here. However, for the qualities of 1 Timothy 3, if I, as a pastor, am going to the bar every night and getting shwasted, you should absolutely either call me out on it, have me fired immediately, or change churches.
Yeah.
And any of those are acceptable. If I am a drunkard, you do not need to be under my spiritual authority. So I'm okay talking to the pastor, being open about things, because in pastors, you need to be open about things.
Yeah.
If you're trying to hide things, then you're probably making some mistakes because you think you're able to hide things, and that's not okay either.
See how well that worked out for
Robbie Zacharias, the whole list of people. It didn't work. We have a podcast coming out about Mark Driscoll. It's more than 4 parts long.
Yeah.
And he wanted to hide most of it. We actually talked on an internet kind of a forum that he had a pseudonym, and the only way that they're able to talk about it is because we found out it was him. Honestly, you can't hide stuff on the internet. Like, what?
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
It is interesting, and I think a lot about that. Like, what we do on our podcast is honestly a little bit like what this podcast is talking about with bloggers. Like, as much as they're talking about that, like, they're still we're still feeding into this guy, and I think he has changed a little bit, at least
somewhat
on
everything you've said, somewhat.
But like, are we actually helping or hurting?
Well, but that's the thing we stated at the beginning of this too, that the point isn't to say, gosh, he nasty, and be like, ooh, girl, I'm gonna tell you about the thing that happened at Mark Driscoll's church. Da 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 da. For sure. I don't know why that's where I'm going on this particular thing, or why in my head I had my hair in that warmer. Well, I don't even know what that thing does. If you're a female who listens to the podcast, please write
the little
in.
bowl that goes over your head.
Like,
I don't know what those do either.
What does that do? I don't know.
I used to go to the salon or whatever with my mom, and I was always so confused.
Our goal, especially in delving into these topics, isn't to kind of go back and say, ooh, spicy, juicy gossip, but as all of us are growing and moving ahead, we have to be able to stare at the past and say, okay, how can we do this better?
Yeah,
and
that's good.
And I think by pulling it to 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7, and being honest about the things they did, while still acknowledging that these are our brothers and sisters in Christ, I'm kind of Joshua Harris, I don't know. That one's a coin flip, I'll be honest. But acknowledging that they are brothers and sisters in Christ who will be judged harsher by God because of the things they said. We have to be able to press ahead. The goal is to go ahead,
right?
And not just to stare back and go, ooh, juicy.
Right, for sure. That's good. Yeah, I think it's that's so true, and I hope that, like, we do learn from this. I hope that as these things continue to grow out, that that we would talk about Mark Driscoll with grace and truth, and not talking about him like he's some person from our high school we used to go to, and that I hated that guy. Blah,
I mean,
blah.
people try and create this caricature of individuals that they're either 100% good or just the devil incarnate, and I think the thing, if all of us are being honest, is that we're all somewhere in the middle. And that there are even at these churches, although I would disagree on a lot of the teaching strategy and a lot of things about them, people came to Christ, and I don't think that speaks to the skill of the preacher or the skill of anybody else, but the sovereignty of God to be able to work through anything that he's given. Is like, hey, even if the message stinks, I can still work through that. That's how dope God is. I mean, just the glory of God will not be stopped, even if it's in the hands of terrible men. Right. And when we approach it from that type of a manner, we can kind of appreciate the things that happened a bit and cry about the sad parts.
Yeah. I think I say it every time as we're reaching the end of our podcast, but the one thing that we need is Jesus. And specifically for situations like this, we need to know him and know his word. And I can't get over that because it's just true. And I hate to just slap that on everything, but it's just true. Jesus is the thing that that makes everything work. And when we know his word, we know him. And when we know him, we're able to see these things for what they are, and we're able to talk about them and act in love, because of him. And I hope that through this, and as more episodes of this podcast come out, that we wouldn't just enjoy this as content, but we would genuinely listen and learn and hear what this guy, Mike Cosper, I can't remember his name, what Mike Cosper is trying to say to us, and that we'd be reading the word, not our word. I don't know what our word would be.
Journal.
Yeah.
You should journal. And read it back to yourself, but feel like it's holy.
But seriously, take these
Jesus
things.
Calling.
And
I'm so sorry. I don't know why I just randomly called out that one.
Jeez.
I am so sorry.
Wow. But that we would seriously take these things and apply them to our own churches, and like we said, not out of just to critique for critique's sake, but that we would do this to love our church family and our pastors well, and that we would do everything in grace, love, and truth. And
so
yeah,
we want to hear from you, and instead of we always want to hear from them, Caleb. We want to hear from you. Where do you fall into the temptation of pursuing the spice of the story instead of pursuing the truth and grace of Christ? Because it'd be easy to go, where have you seen pastors fail? And
we could point to a million areas.
I do that more than any of you, so it's fine. But all of us do have this ingrained kind of need for drama. So where do you struggle the most through trying to find the drama in church spice, and in what ways can the gospel point us back to Christ in that process? And there are a couple places that you can come and tell us all about it. The first is through our website at thegospeloutpost.com/nobodyspecial.
Sure.
There's a form on the webpage, and I almost guarantee that you know how forms work.
Yes. Email, message, send.
Type in.
Pretty easy.
It doesn't even have to be a real email address. I promise. We've gotten some doozies.
Yes. Yes, we have.
Caleb, what if they don't have email, but they have social media?
You can go to
Then
Nobody's
you're
Special
a wizard, because that's not a thing that happens. Sorry, go ahead.
That's true. You can go to Nobody's Special Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. You can follow us there if you want to see when we release our episodes on the podcast platforms and YouTube. And you can comment, direct message. We'll get it. We'll receive it, and we'll answer your questions. You can also find us on YouTube under the Gospel Outpost. You can comment there as well. Make sure to subscribe if you want. Yeah. But yeah, seriously, thank you guys for supporting us and listening. And we pray that you would be able to take what you hear and be able to apply that to your life, and that it would help you walk with Jesus better, be able to grow with people around you in him. And and also, we didn't mention it, pray for your pastors, pray for your staff, because that does a lot. It does. And for me, it's hard to do that. Sorry, I'm jumping back into topic, but for me, it's hard to do that because prayer, you just don't see the results. It's less tangible when you do things like that. For prayer, for me at least, that's how I feel. But I know that it's powerful and it works, and that God moves through prayer and hears them and loves when we talk to him. So Pray.
Absolutely. So we want to hear from you. We already did that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey, also just one more quick thing. Sorry,
Yes.
I had a thing.
Yes.
So go to our Instagram page for Nobody Special Podcast. You can even put it back up if you want to edit that back in. Whatever.
Yeah.
There's I can't figure it out. There's a hashtag I'm putting on all of our posts that for some reason people. Bots comment on it and ask us to promote it on their record label, and I can almost guarantee we are not what they're looking for.
Yeah.
But I don't know the hashtag I'm using to get their attention. And so, if you would go to our Instagram and just give us your best guess after, because they post within seconds of me posting it.
I always go on and try and delete them.
No, keep them.
Keep them.
Yeah, why not? They're not doing any harm. Anyway.
Promote it on. There's
right.
like 50 of them.
Right. So one of these days, I'm going to just come in a bit of money and just be like, sure, why not? Here's $20. So anyway. Well, Caleb, I've had fun.
Yes.
We've grown as friends in the process. And
gosh.
the real pastoring was
That was the real
in front
lesson
of us
all
all
along.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. So I'm Danny.
And I'm Caleb.
And we are
Nobody special.